Okay, let us start with volume 26, I think. It was volume 26. Anyway, this is volume 5. Prologue. Streaming in through the window was the warm spring sunlight, which made the plant life a more vivid green and the flowers a vibrant array of colors. It was the perfect occasion for a casual stroll, but the castle garden was empty of people. Everyone was busy with the upcoming Archduke conference. Some cut direct paths to the garden to save time, but none were taking in the scenery. Bonifacius, like so many others, had no time to appreciate the changing of the seasons. In fact, seeing the increasing vibrancy of the garden made him feel worse. It was a painful reminder that they had so little time before the Archduke conference. He advanced to the tea party room, taking care not to let his irritation show on his face. He had told his attendants to arrange a meeting with Sylvester. There was something they needed to discuss. And they had eventually decided upon this lunchtime. It was clear how full the Archduke's hands were full from the fact that he was having his food brought to the break room right next to his office. Ah, Riarda. Among those preparing lunch in the break room was none other than Riarda. Only then did Bonifacius remember. She had returned to being Sylvester's attendant. She was an unusual retainer in that she changed whom she served according to the Abb's orders. For the most part, she tended to the members of the archducal family who were in difficult positions and struggling to get retainers of their own. After being trained as an attendant by Gretchen, an old member of the archducal family, Riarda had followed the orders of the Ob 2 generations ago, and served Gabriel when she married in from Ehrensbach, then Veronica when the Lies gangs were ostracizing her. She had even been sent to Bonifacius' estate by Sylvester's father, Adalbert, the previous archduke. Bonifacius had asked for his son Karlstadt to be tutored prior to his baptism, after which he would enter the castle as an archduke candidate. Then, after Karlstadt was baptized, Veronica had requested that Riarda be assigned to Georgine, who had needed a tutor they could trust. Adalbert had accepted, and Riarda had become Georgine's head attendant. Later, when Sylvester was born, she had been made his nurse as a male. He had taken priority to become the next archduke. Sometime later, Riarda had come to serve Rosamund as her head attendant. Sylvester had ordered it because Rosamund was raised in the temple, and would therefore struggle to find retainers, but Bonifacius had recently started to suspect that Sylvester had also wanted to prevent Rosamund from socializing with her family. Well, yeah, because they're toxic. Well, they were toxic. They're gone now. Yeah, Rosemary's side of the family is gone. Kaput. Bye-bye. Dead. Welcome, Riarda said. Lord Sylvester's work has taken him a bit longer than planned. He sent an ordinance just a moment ago and should be here soon. She guided Bonifacius to his seat, then directed the other attendants to serve him. It's his own fault, but Sylvester sure is busy, huh? Bonifacius remarked. Indeed, he has never had so much work to do before. Do be gentle with him. I'm not as soft as Ferdinand. An archduke doing his own work is how things were supposed to be. Wow, he says Ferdinand is soft. Well, yeah, because Ferdinand would do some of the work for him. So, yeah, I can kind of understand that. Because of the purge, Sylvester was operating with fewer retainers than usual, but that was far from the only reason for his enormous workload. In the castle, Wilfrid and Bonifacius were able to help with the duties that had previously been done by Ferdinand, but everything that was rightfully the work of an archduke had been dropped squarely in Sylvester's lap. Still, Riarda sighed, I wish this hadn't happened so close to the Archduke conference, when he's already so busy with his preparations. As the Archduke, he could at least lend a hand in training Wilfrid to take his place. Now that Rosamund has outright refused to help the kid, she might even start dumping her work on him. She's not going to do that. Well, maybe. Bonifacius had supported all three archdukes. His father, younger brother, and nephew, Sylvester, had come to him for help 3 years after becoming Ob. He had wanted to push Veronica and her retainers into retirement, which he intended to do by relieving everyone above a certain age of their duties. In the end, Bonifacius and Veronica had stepped down from their roles, though they had continued to provide mana to the Foundation. Now, however, Bonifacius was anything but retired. He was frequenting the training grounds, drilling the knights, and helping with desk work, all to impress his adorable granddaughter and secure more opportunities to spend time with her. Bonifacius had originally had a second ulterior motive as well. If the Lies gangs had managed to establish Rosamund as Sylvester's successor, then he could have spent as much time with her as under the guise of training her to be the next Archduchess. However, he had given up on that idea after Rosamund shot him down and said that she would rather stay in the temple. Getting time with his granddaughter was no easy feat. My, Riarda said, training the next Archduke is your job, Lord Bonifacius. As I recall, that promise was the only reason you managed to avoid taking the Archducal seat yourself. Some history is too ancient to discuss. Riarda cackled. A promise is a promise, no matter how long ago it was made. Bonifacius grimaced on instinct. He often found it hard to deal with Riarda when she knew so much about his past. As she had said, he had once made a promise to his father, who had served as the Archduke 2 generations ago. To avoid having to rule the duchy himself, Bonifacius had agreed to become an educator of Archduke candidates, and transfer his knowledge to the next generation. Adalbert had not been at all well, so he had needed someone to teach his son in case he died prematurely. Give me a break, Bonifacius grumbled. I should be enjoying my retirement, but I've been helping out in the castle instead. That's your own choice there. I've even been educating Wilfrid, which is more than I signed up for, if you ask me. Adalbert was sickly and needed support. Sylvester could easily manage by himself. I want to spend my time like any other grandfather, relaxing and doting on my granddaughter. How can you do that when you still don't know how to control your strength? Much to Bonifacius' frustration, everyone seemed to fear for Rosamund's life the very moment he got close to her. Well, I mean, your track record kind of speaks for itself. You threw her in that bag when she got kidnapped. Stupidly. You could have just ripped the bag apart. I don't know why you didn't do that. When you picked her up and tossed her into the air, you almost got her to hit the ceiling. I kind of understand why they're fearing for her life. If I missed any of those little moments, let me know. People work to keep them apart as much as possible. I mean, I do feel bad about the time I got a bit too excited and almost threw it to the ceiling, but... After that experience, Bonifacius had committed to memory that Rosamund wasn't like his other grandchildren, who were always eager to train with him. You two seem to be having fun, Sylvester opined as he entered the room with his entourage. He asked Riarda and Karstedt to stay, as his attendant and guard respectfully, then told his other retainers to leave and eat lunch. They had an equally harsh afternoon to prepare themselves for. Together, Bonifacius' attendant and Riarda presented their lords with plenty of decorated vegetables. They introduced the dish as... What the fuck? Rosamund, what are you naming these things for? Crispy Lawnade and Sudaru salad. Bonifacius didn't recognize the name at all. Was it another new dish? Rosamund's chefs had dramatically changed the castle's menu. After waiting for Sylvester to take the first bite, he tried what turned out to be slightly sour vegetable. Sylvester normally hates vegetables, but he's eating like there's no tomorrow. My granddaughter's recipes sure are the best in the world. Bonifacius chewed the bitter vegetables, which young children famously despised. While silently praising Rosamund, she had prepared them in a way that stopped even Sylvester from complaining. So, what's the issue? Sylvester asked midway through the meal, the picture of exhaustion. Concerned about something? About everything! Bonifacius knew what he was about to increase the already tiresome burden on Sylvester, but only the Archduke could resolve his grievances. First of all, you need to whip Wilfrid into shape. If his attitude doesn't change soon, I'm going to wash my hands of him. Wow! Even he's starting to give up on him. Wilfrid, you need to change your attitude and quick. Someone needs to stop someone from whispering words of poison in his ear. Sylvester took a sharp breath, his eyes wide open. Meanwhile, Riarda exclaimed, Lord Bonifacius, such words are not to be spoken lightly. Bonifacius was in charge of preparing Wilfrid to become the next Archduke. By refusing to help the boy any further, he would essentially be declaring him unfit to rule. Bonifacius understood this perfectly well. His attitude, Sylvester repeated, What do you mean? He came to me with some complaints, but that was before spring prayer. He even ended up coming around. Is there still a problem? Have his retainers told you nothing? Bonifacius asked. They informed me that the Liesgang nobles treated him cruelly, and that I reprimand them. Of course, I requested more details. I remember the Liesgangs as being rude, but never particularly cruel. Wilfrid's retainers had in fact spoken to the Archduke, but not about their lord's work ethic. Instead, they had reported on how the Liesgang nobles had treated him during spring prayer. He recklessly charged into the homes of one Liesgang after another, including those who wished to use this purge to eliminate all traces of the Veronica faction, Bonifacius explained. A Gieb trying to contain these extremists could say that Wilfrid was stirring the pot, and they wouldn't be wrong. Why did you let him go? Laurentia told me that for him to gain more self-awareness as the next Archduke, he needs to experience the consequences of his actions. A man's decision as the Archduke could end up having a dramatic impact on the duchy he ruled, so it was crucial that he always be held accountable for them. That was why Wilfrid needed more experience before assuming the role himself. Gathering intelligence was absolutely essential when it came to making the decision one considered to be most correct. Only after choosing which information was trustworthy and the most accurate could one make an educated decision. Sylvester continued, Spring prayer is crucial to Ehrenfest. The duchy's harvest is greatly dependent on the chalices we hand out. Plus, as with all such religious events, the onus falls on Rosemind. As much as the Alliance gangs might hate Wilfred, they wouldn't risk doing anything to him. It was the perfect opportunity for him to experience their anger firsthand. It is in a safe environment, and to understand him more intimately than if we had merely explained the situation to him. It would also teach him the importance of gathering information, or so Florencia said. I see, Bonifacius murmured, then crossed his arms. Such experience really was important for the next Archduke. But, as it turns out, this was too great a burden for Wilfred to bear. His work ethic has gotten worse since his return from spring prayer. Even after 5 days of warning him, his attitude has not improved. A mere 5 days, Riarda cried. Give him more time. We all come up short every now and again. Surely this isn't enough for you to cast him aside. She was quick to protest, but she hadn't seen Wilfred at work. A mere 5 days to her was an excruciating 5 days to Bonifacius and the retainers. The problem is not that he failed. Rather, he's abandoning his duties as the next Archduke and continuously flaunting his defiance. I cannot even begin to describe the foolishness of exposing one's weaknesses to opposing nobles. Just how old is that buffoon? Almost 13, I think? Wilfred was now approaching his 4th year at the Royal Academy, yet he was acting in a way that would have earned a newly baptized child a scolding. One had to wonder whether he was behaving so immaturely around the nobles of other duchies, and it went without saying that nobody would want to entrust Ehrenfest's future to someone who acted so emotionally. Even Rosemind's easier to control in her emotions than he is right now. Wow. And that's saying something, since she wears her heart on her sleeves. Everyone is busy enough preparing for the upcoming Archduke conference, Bonifacius said. If anyone should take the lead right now, it should be one of those of the Archducal family who enacted the purge in the first place. Yet the next Archduke is refusing to work and continues to be defiant even when warned. I can't imagine what, if anything, must be going through his head. If nothing changes and everyone comes to despise him, then he will have brought about his own undoing. Does he not understand the severity of this? In the first place, Bonifacius was unable to give Wilfred too strong a scolding when they were in public. Doing so would risk making the boy look unfit to rule, which was dangerous when so many nobles already wanted Rosemind to take his place. What they need to do is get Rosemind to make one of those fan things again and smack him upside the head a couple times. And say, you are an idiot! No, Ferdinand needs to be the one to do that. Because if Rosemind does it, then, well, it'll be kind of, not helping the situation. No, Sylvester, Florencia, or Ferdinand needs to do that. They need to smack some sense into him, literally. In the first place, Bonifacius was unable to give Wilfred I've already done that. Okay. I've already done that. No matter how many times he was warned, however, Wilfred would only ever point and say, you're only harsh with me because you want Rosemind to be on the next ob. Oh my god! He doesn't have to be harsh with Rosemind because she knows what she's doing. Duh! She actually does her work. You don't. Indeed, it made sense that Wilfred was reluctant to accept advice from someone who was supporting Rosemind. For that reason, Bonifacius had asked Lampert to give warnings to it in his stead. 5 days later, however, nothing had changed. Wilfred is proud to have stood among the top-ranking Archduke candidates as an honor student, but those good grades won't mean a thing unless he starts acting like a proper Archduke, Bonifacius concluded. You know, Florencia was worried about the same thing. She feared that his hard work was improving his grades and nothing else, Sylvester said, bringing his spoon to his mouth while he tried to remember the conversation. Bonifacius grimaced. It sounded as though Sylvester wasn't taking his wife's opinion seriously. It seems to me that Wilfred isn't the only one who needs to start listening more. Don't tell me you ignored a warning that important. No, I didn't ignore it. Her warning was why I relieved Oswald of duty. He wasn't giving Wilfred a proper education. It also was why I started listening to the boy's complaints about how the purge has impacted his life. Oswald was the embodiment of Veronica's methods, and it seemed that his manipulation tactics had only gotten worse after Wilfred became engaged to Rosemind and secured his position as the next Ob Ehrenfest. Oswald took his work seriously and was completely loyal to Wilfred, Sylvester continued. The problem was that he expressed his loyalty and carried out his duties exactly as he did during Mother's era. He never realized that what had once been marks of excellence were now marks of tyranny. Or, well, maybe he did and just couldn't change his ways. Perhaps he didn't want to change them. At any rate, to honor his loyalty, I gave him the option of resigning to save face. Bonifacius had been told that Oswald resigned because of the purge, but now he knew the truth. The former head attendant had been relieved of duty after failing to give Wilfred a proper education. I sincerely hope that giving Wilfred a new head attendant improves things, Bonifacius said, but his retainers are all too soft on him. Lampert even said to stop comparing him to Rosemind. It was Milady herself who first made that request, Riarda said, referring to when everyone had worked together to help Wilfred catch up in time for his debut. She said that my boy would end up crushed under the weight of the pressure. Bonifacius paused, thinking back to all the times he had compared the two at work. That's news to me still, Riarda. That was between his baptism and debut, wasn't it? How long will it remain relevant? At the Royal Academy, he's going to be compared to Rosemary whenever he likes it or not. Yeah, he will. And so will Charlotte. Charlotte will be compared to Rosemary too. They'll all be compared to each other. Are his retainers really still treading on eggshells even now that he's going into his 4th year? The lady spoke as though it would always be relevant, but I do not know how long it will actually stick. That said, indeed, it will not apply when it comes to other nobles. Rosemine's request had only been feasible when Wilfrid was young and still receiving his education in the isolated northern building. It was inevitable that he would be compared to other Archduke candidates at the Royal Academy, and people were guaranteed to focus on the quality of his work while he helped out in the castle. On top of all that, when he came of age, he would be compared to Ehrenfest's other Archduke candidates for the sake of picking the next Ob. That was just how it was. Sylvester Boniface said, if your son doesn't intend to improve, then remove him from his position as the next Archduke. I would disown Rosemary in the same breath, Sylvester replied, narrowing his dark green eyes. Boniface sighed. He knew that Sylvester wasn't bluffing. During this conflict with the Elias gangs, he had discovered the true reasons for Rosemine's adoption. She had been taken into the Archducal family to save her from the tyranny of an Arensbach archnoble who had infiltrated the temple, to prevent Veronica from warping the lives of any more victims, so that Sylvester could use her printing industry to bring the Shaken Duchy under one banner. Even though Rosemine had so many talents, Sylvester had absolutely no intention of making a child who wasn't Florencia's the next Archduke. Yeah, and she doesn't even want it anyway, so it kind of works out anyway. Bonifacius even recalled Sylvester telling him that if making his granddaughter the next Ob was truly his aim, he should have become the Ob himself instead of running from his duty. How was Florencia, Bonifacius asked, changing the subject. He still didn't believe that Wilfrid was speaking or acting as the next Archduke should, but continuing his demands would get him nowhere. Sylvester's expression softened. Her morning sickness has settled down, but she can hardly relax knowing that our children are so busy. Even while she's so unwell, she keeps trying to help with the workload, which only makes her retainers worry. Could she not leave the conference preparations to the children and just perform final checks? Charlotte can more or less take care of everything else. She's motivated and a fast learner. Anytime Florencia was feeling especially sick, Charlotte would go to the office where Bonifacius and the others worked to help out, and ask questions. On such occasions, it was obvious how hard she was trying to support her mother. At other times, she would apparently help Brunhilde with introductory communications and socializing. Charlotte's working hard while Brunhilde and Clarissa are going above and beyond to prepare for the Archduke Conference, Sylvester said, looking relieved. That silver lining in all this is that we will be able to attend without Florencia needing to overexert herself. But Bonifacius merely nodded in response, his features drawn into a frown. He agreed that Brunhilde was a reliable helper. She had said that she was used to this manner of work after preparing for the introductory tournament, and it was proof that Florencia's health was being taken into consideration. However, Sylvester's relief was exactly why he was blind to the issue staring them all in the face. Brunhilde is now set to become your second wife, Bonifacius eventually said, but the duchy's nobles still see her as Rosemine's retainer. That's how they see Riarda too, for that matter. As for Feline and Carissa, they're working under Lebrecht. It seems that all that Rosemine is heavily involved in this upcoming Archduke Conference. Well, they're not wrong. She's transcribing books and performing a starbind ceremony at the royal family's request. That isn't what I meant, Bonifacius replied. He thought that Sylvester sounded much too relaxed, and surely he wasn't the only one who found it so exasperating. You don't even have time to go to the dining hall for lunch. Florencia is unable to rest, so Brunhilde and Charlotte are doing their best to support her. Rosemine's retainers are working so hard that everyone assumes she's deeply involved with the Archduke Conference, even though she isn't even in the castle. Melkor has declared that he'll take her place in the temple. Everyone is proving themselves. Everyone except Wilfrid, who seems content with grumbling about how he was treated during spring prayer and shirking his duties in full view of so many others. I implore you, think for one moment how the nobles visiting the office must see him. Sylvester fell silent. The visiting nobles wouldn't care about how the Elias gangs were treating Wilfrid, nor would they care how hurt he was feeling. Their only concern was whether he was acting like and producing results expected of the next Archduke. In the end, it falls to you to decide who should serve as the next Archduke, Bonifacius said. I don't have anything else to say about the matter, but know that I'm taking a break from educating Wilfrid. There's no point rushing him when he cannot even complete the work he has been given. My time is better spent on my own duties. All right, I'll warn Wilfrid myself. If you don't want him to be the next Archduke, have Charlotte be the next Archduchess. That would solve your problem there. Because then Charlotte would be the next Archduchess. She would still be your child, Florence's child, so she would make it for an Archduchess, and this would give her what she wants, essentially. Wilfrid wouldn't be the next Archduke. Rosemine wouldn't have to worry about it, and I don't know if they would still be engaged by that point. I don't know. Maybe not. I don't know. But they wouldn't have to worry about all that. About the Lies Gangs trying to get her to be the next Ob. Actually, they probably still would try. But, yeah. It'd be better to have Charlotte be the Archduchess and not Wilfrid at this point. Wilfrid was bound to acknowledge a warning from his own father, the Archduke. That was what Bonifacius believed, at least. He relaxed a bit, relieved to have gotten one of his concerns through to Sylvester, then looked down at the plate of meat that had been put before him. He could tell from the brown skin that it was a bird of some kind, but he couldn't work out anything beyond that. This is Krun Juju Farbs, according to Lady Rosemine. I see, Bonifacius replied with a nod. He knew what Farbas were, but the Krun Juju part meant absolutely nothing to him. I agree! I'm assuming that's a Japanese thing. At the very least, it seemed that the names Rosemine came up with often had repetitive onomatopoeia crammed into them. He had once asked whether they had something to do with the ingredients or how they were cooked, but not even the chefs knew. Rosemine was naming her dishes in her own Rosemine way. Weird names aside, the recipes taste great, and my granddaughter remains amazing. Sylvester, have you heard any rumors about Rosemine lately? Bonifacius asked. I came across a few strange ones myself. Strange rumors? Like what? Sylvester replied. He turned to look at Riarda, but neither she nor Karsta seemed to have any idea either. It would seem that those ones of the former Veronica faction are saying, albeit only amongst themselves, that Rosemine is in love with Ferdinand. They claim that she prioritizes him over her own fiancé, and the two apparently made physical contact when they reunited on the night of the introductory tournament. Whoa, hello? Doctor, hello? Kinda hard to get out of that habit there. He's her doctor. What do you expect? He's gonna have to make physical contact to check her temperature, her pulse, and everything. Even if he's still an Arenfest citizen because he's not yet married. So, it's not that big a deal. He was already doing that anyway when she was engaged to Wilfrid before, so what's the problem now? But Bonifacius hadn't been present to witness anything like that, but Sylvester and Riarda had. Surely they had noticed something. His anticipation soon faded, however, as the two merely blinked in bewilderment. On the night of the introductory tournament, Sylvester asked, I don't know about that. You were with her, right, Riarda? Did you see anything? I was with my lady the entire day, but saw nothing to warrant rumors. Rest assured, I would have reported any such behavior. At most, there was the medical inspection. He did technically touch her then, but only as part of a standard procedure to check on her poor health. She frowned and placed a hand on her cheek. Was it Oswald who began that rumor? He certainly has a malicious interpretation of events. Bonifacius blinked, surprised that she had made such a quick deduction. What makes you so sure it was him? By the time it happened, Lord Sylvester and the other students' retainers had already moved to the dining hall to eat. The only ones present were Lady Rosemine, my boy Ferdinand, are the guests, and the attendants serving their meals. Oswald and me. Everyone understood right away. Rosemine or Ferdinand certainly wouldn't have spread such a rumor, and that it was being circulated through the former Veronica faction meant it could only have come from Oswald or Wilfrid. Yes, Oswald was most likely involved, Bonifacius said. We shouldn't jump to any conclusions, however. It's possible that another noble happened to hear Rosemine rejoicing about her reunion with Ferdinand, exaggerated the details, and then spread some deceptive rumor. A single malicious actor could turn even the most heartwarming news into something corrupt, and with that in mind, the rumor could have come from one of Rosemine's retainers making an innocuous comment. Sylvester looked contemplative. Bonifacius, where's that rumor spreading from? Not the source, but the people helping it circulate. Is it really only about the night of the introductory tournament? Bonifacius had already tried to investigate the matter to no avail. The Lies Gangs were too busy despairing about Rosemine's refusal to be the next Ob, and her decision to stay in the temple to be of any use, while the nobles of the former Veronica faction were avoiding Bonifacius and his retainers, for fear of punishment. Despite his best efforts, nobody has seemed to know anything. To be frank, I don't know either, Bonifacius said. The most I can contribute is that when I tried to warn Wilfrid about all this, he said that Rosemine was to blame for inspiring the rumor in the first place. What? Sylvester put his head in his hands. You mean to say that Wilfrid is substantiating the rumor instead of denying it? He was denying it before. Before Oswald got into his head, he was denying it. He was saying it was just standard medical practice because he's her doctor. Freaking Oswald, smack him! Smack him! Smack him a few times! Bonifacius, smack him! That should get into his head, that he's doing things wrong. That can't be right. He can't be that thoughtless. Carr said, we're going to look into this ourselves. From there, Bonifacius could extrapolate that the rumors were indeed only spreading among Wilfrid and those of the former Veronica faction. Let's assume for a moment that Oswald was responsible for Bonifacius' venture. Was it revenge for being relieved of duty? Riarda shook her head. As I see it, Oswald always has Wilfred as his top priority. It appears more likely that he was only damaging Milady's reputation to protect his lord. She believed that he had tried to drag down Rosamund to divert negative attention away from Wilfred. All these present recognized it as a method that Veronica had employed often. That's one troublesome kind of devotion, Sylvester muttered, his face twisting in displeasure. Riarda nodded in agreement, then suddenly looked worried. However, Lady Rosamund has grown quite considerably. Coupled with the fact that Lord Ferdinand is no longer an Ehrenfest, I think the time that has come for her to reevaluate her relationship with him. A few words of advice might be in order. Rosamund had spent so long looking more or less like a child, and now she actually looked old enough to be attending the Royal Academy. This was advantageous in many regards, but a lot of things that had once been permitted due to her young appearance were no longer acceptable. She could no longer be afforded the same leeway. Let's just hope Rosamund doesn't end up like Georgine. Georgine? What, you think that she actually is in love with Ferdinand? And that she would just force her way into Arensbach to get him back? Actually, she probably would do that. Especially if she thought he was being mistreated. If she thought that something bad was happening to him, she would do that. But, in general, she wouldn't. She probably does want him to come home, but she's not going to voice it because she knows he can't. She knows how to draw the line. Bonifacius crossed his arms as he reflected on the past. Veronica had been nothing but ruthless when raising Georgine, all to ensure that Cardset, Elias' gang, would never become the Ob. The only other person who could ever treated Georgine nicely and given her any respite was her uncle, Besenwast. He had served as the High Bishop back then, which had caused problems when it came time for Georgine to attend the Royal Academy. As a noble, she hadn't been allowed to have any connections to the temple, so she had immediately been forbidden from contacting him. This development hadn't come as a surprise to anyone, but Georgine had been devastated nonetheless, something she had made painfully clear. Bonifacius had wanted to extend a helping hand to his niece, but his first wife's relationship with Veronica hadn't been the slightest bit positive. Plus, with Georgine viewing Cardset as an enemy, there hadn't been anything he could do to get closer to her. This time, however, I'll do the right thing. I'll shower Rosamund with all the love I've got. Indeed, he would shower her with support to help her through the emotional turmoil of needing to take a step back from Ferdinand. But as Bonifacius was pondering how best to go about that, Sylvester spoke up. If people really are spreading those rumors, we'll need to stamp them out. Bonifacius, have you taken action yet? No matter what we do, we're going to have a hard time putting out those fires without Rosamund here. Would have noticed them sooner if she had been at the castle, and we would have responded faster too. Rosamund's retainers would have been quick to notice any strange rumors about their lady. Moreover, if she had been spending time with Wilfred in the castle, anyone trying to argue that she was closer to Ferdinand wouldn't have had much of a leg to stand on. As for Bonifacius himself, although the temple's reputation was improving with all the countrywide changes, he was still reluctant about leaving his adorable granddaughter there. Everyone knows Rosamund for her brilliance and charm, so why keep drawing attention to the blemish that is her temple upbringing? Bonifacius asked. She would have done herself a lot more favors by leaving the temple to someone else and gathering support from the nobility. I thought the same, Riarda interjected, but Milady really does treasure her time in the temple. One should compare it to how apprentice knights staying in the knight's dormitory are allowed to return home at regular intervals. She had started serving Rosamund right after the girl was baptized, so if she said that Rosamund valued her time in the temple, Bonifacius saw no reason to doubt her. Still, it's because she was raised in the temple that she needs to be taught how to be a proper first wife, he said. The last gang's complaints about coming to mind, she should be socializing, not hiding away in the temple. As far as the Elias gangs were concerned, their princess was being very uncooperative. Things had settled down a bit after Brunhilde's engagement was announced, but many houses still wanted Rosamund out of the temple, and their cooperation would be crucial moving forward. Overseeing duchy industries is a job for obs and scholars, Bonifacius declared. You need to take charge of the printing industry with Wilfred at your side while Florencia teaches Rosamund how to be a first wife. That's final. Sylvester yelped, if my workload gets any more unbearable, I'll seriously die. You're a professional when it comes to shirking duties. I'm sure you'll discover a way to get some rest. Riarda and Karstedt both grinned, looking equal parts amused and in agreement. Upon seeing his retainer smile, Sylvester let out a displeased groan. He took another bite of meat. He then scanned the room as he chewed. I understand your point, Bonifacius, but it's too late to tell Rosamund to come back from the temple. Her leaving now would only cause more problems. You need to do more work, sure, but would it really affect much else? The temple wasn't of much importance to Bonifacius. It was merely where people with desires too crude to mention in public went to have their needs met. Hey, it's not a brothel! Although it had changed somewhat over the past few years, it still wasn't a good place for someone as young as Rosamund to be staying. It would affect our religious ceremonies, which would directly impact the duchy's harvest, Sylvester replied. Consider also that our meetings with the merchants take place in the lower city, and nobody can deny that our business with other duchies has only been going so well thanks to the commoners' input. Above all else, don't forget about those children of the former Veronica faction staying in the temple who will keep a close eye on them if not Rosemine's retainers. He was right, they had spared the children of those criminals from execution, but the Archducal family still needed to watch them closely. Rosamine was compassionate to a fault when it came to kids, but Hartman and her retainers would remain vigilant. Speaking of which, her retainers are a problem too, Boniface said. You're going to complain about them as well as Wilfrid? Sylvester asked, taken aback. Riarda and Carson looked equally surprised, but Boniface was more amazed that they hadn't noticed the issue themselves. Her retainers aren't even trying to encourage her to perform normal socializing. In fact, they seem to be purposely avoiding it. This behavior is sullying her good name among the Lies gangs, her power base. Something must be done. Shut up. Bonifacius had already tried to warn Cornelius, but the boy had merely replied that the old methods weren't applicable to Rosamine. He had said that speeding along the generational shift and preparing to socialize like the top-ranking duchies took priority instead. I take no issue with this generational shift, Bonifacius continued, but a future first wife absolutely needs to know how to perform traditional socializing. This new form to appease the top-ranking duchies can come later, once she knows Ehrenfest's own ways. Indeed, socializing with the top-ranking duchies would most likely require a new approach. But Ehrenfest nobles would only respond to more traditional methods. They would serve as her foundation and stop the earth from giving out beneath her feet. Still, Bonifacius persisted. Rosamine refuses to socialize here in Ehrenfest because she claims to be too busy with temple work. But her retainers have done nothing to remedy this. How can a first wife not know proper socializing? You should appreciate better than anyone the fate of an archducal family that can no longer understand its people. Its people are the commoners. The nobles are only a small portion of that. If she doesn't take care of the commoners, they're all going to die because no one's going to be there to tend the farms. No one's going to be there to cook, to do anything that the commoners do. The nobles can't do that because they can't do that. Their attendants are going to be too thin to do that. So, hello. Bonifacius couldn't see a future where Rosamine's shortcomings wouldn't cause her problems. He knew that being open to new methods was important, but how would she convince the other nobles to try them if she couldn't properly communicate with them? That won't ever be feasible for Rosamine, Sylvester said. She was raised in the temple, and after she was baptized, she received an education from Ferdinand, not the Lies gangs. Ferdinand, too, had endured a particularly unique upbringing. His mother had passed away before his baptism, so he had entered the castle as an archducal family member without a support base to speak of. He had been ostracized by Veronica, the first wife at the time, raised without a chance to properly interact with other Ehrenfest nobles, and now relegated to the temple after his father's death. One could hardly describe him as an expert on socializing. "Milady works hard in her own way," Riarda interjected while setting a plate in front of Sylvester. "But there is much that she only understands on a surface level. She is by no means progressing as everyone hoped. My boy Wilfrid is guilty of a similar cycle of errors. Although he can mimic things, he seldom fundamentally understands them." "You would install an archducal couple incapable of proper socializing?" Bonifacius asked. "I fear for Ehrenfest's future." "Brunhilde is going to support them as my second wife," Sylvester replied. "Rosamine's true strength comes from the fact that she surrounds herself with people who make up for what she lacks." Rosamine had very few adult retainers in her service, but her underage retainers were so well trained that it barely even mattered. Making up her retinue were Hartmut, who had been taught how to gather information by Ferdinand and Justice, her apprentice scholars who were capable of negotiating with commoners, her guard knights who had overcome their faults and grown stronger, and her attendants who could bring even top-ranking duchies to the negotiating table. I mean, hello? Dude, you could be terrible at something, and no matter how hard you try, you could end up not getting any better at it. Why focus on that when you might have a friend who is excellent at that and could help you with that? You could cover each other's backs. Hello? It's like in a fight. "Rosamine is good at raising people," Sylvester concluded. "Even I covet her retainers." Bonifacius paused in reflection. Daniel was a lay knight, but he was gradually securing more mana through compression and was an expert at using it precisely. Judith had been advised to prioritize her aim over her sword arm, and the rate at which she was progressing suggested that she had taken those words to heart. Angelica wasn't the most thoughtful, but she loyally followed her orders and boasted lightning-fast reflexes. Lenore had a good memory and excellent leadership skills, which she put to use as a budding commander. And as for Cornelius, while he didn't have any notable strengths, he didn't have any weaknesses either, meaning he could easily fight alongside anyone. Those retainers had a common thread running through them. Rosemine had advised them all and gotten them on the right path. I'm worried about her name-sworn retainers, Bonifacius clarified, but Rosemine should be able to control them. Right, they definitely could grow into problems. Bonifacius recalled what he and the other children had investigated the estates of those names sworn to Georgine. He had noticed then that those who had used name swearing to avoid punishment by association had varying opinions about their position and contrasting degrees of appreciation for the archducal family. Not to mention, Bonifacius said those old enough to remember when Veronica forced others to give their names came to view Rosemine with the same fear and unease, even though she was saving their lives. I don't see why, Sylvester said, looking annoyed as he started on his dessert. I'm the one who suggested it. Bonifacius tried the dessert as well. It had an unusual yet intriguing mouthfeel, meaning it had no doubt come from his granddaughter, and that was precisely the issue. These days, everyone assumes that anything bizarre and original must have come from Rosemine. Rumor has it that you were simply acting in support of an idea she came up with. And since you dismiss your retainers when making such important decisions, nobody can confirm otherwise. Well, Sylvester murmured, I suppose I came up with the idea after Rosemine suggested that we spare Viscount Daldal's life in return for his name. Oh? Ferdinand had been instructing the Knights Order and doing some work in the shadows, but Bonifacius hadn't known the details. By the time he had even noticed, it had all been over and the entire event had been covered up. So it did come from Rosemine. Name swearing is not something to be forced on others, Bonifacius noted. The problem here is that some nobles now believe Rosemine disregarded its true meaning as an expression of voluntary loyalty. Nobles who were around to witness Veronica's distorted version of name swearing even fear that the unfortunate tradition might rise again. The only one who was forced, quote-unquote, to do name swearing was Matthias, Lorenz, and Miriella, and the others that are serving Wolfie and Charlotte. Those were the only ones that were forced. But they did it anyway because they wanted to. Or rather, Matthias and Lorenz did it because they wanted to. And Gracia and Roderick, they did it because they wanted to. They are actually loyal to her. Matthias and Lorenz, I'm sure, are too, but still. Unbeknownst to the Archduke Gabriel, Veronica and Georgine had together spent 3 generations demanding names as proof of obedience. Under normal circumstances, names were offered willingly and as a show of absolute respect. They weren't some commodity to be traded in exchange for one's life. Bonifacius had to wonder whether Rosemine knew that her suggestion had twisted the intended meaning of such a noble gesture. At this rate, she was going to receive the same criticism and reproach as Veronica and Georgine. It isn't always the case that wild new ideas are ultimately accepted, Bonifacius remarked. We must advise Rosemine to spend time as a regular noble and take steps to ensure that people don't fear her. I understand your point, but our current situation would be much worse if not for Rosemine's input, Sylvester rebutted. Her original ideas have saved us more time than I can count. I'm not going to make her stop completely. Instead, I'll just take responsibility for her actions whenever the consequences might be. Another bad rumor or two about me won't change a thing. Again, he was speaking as though it were no big deal. Bonifacius was overcome with a flash of irritation as he said, Ehrenfest certainly won't benefit from more crass hearsay about his archduke. Would the considerate Rosemine really be okay with her ideas damaging Sylvester's reputation and forcing him to take the blame for any bad outcomes? He doubted it. Yeah, she doesn't like that. She does not like the bad rumors. She does not. She had to really restrain herself from not bashing the people who were bashing him. So, yeah. How much does she even know about all this? Was Rosemine being kept in the dark about her retainers just as Wolfried was by his? Did she need advice from a third party? Bonifacius crossed his arms, trying to imagine what fate would befall his granddaughter if she remained unable to socialize with even her family. Apprentice Blues and the orphanage children. By the time spring prayer was completely over, it was midway through the season. The bitter weather had given way to vibrant greenery that seemed to thrive more by the day. Amid the dazzling sunshine, carriages from the castle arrived at the temple's front gate. Their doors opened and the children soon-to-be blue robes gracefully alighted. Gone was the anxiety they had shown during their tour. Instead, they were overflowing with vigor as they climbed the temple steps. As an archducal family member, Melchior had come by high beast rather than by carriage like the others. I welcomed them all as the high bishop. Henceforth, they would be living here in the temple. Right, I said, let us go to the high bishop's chambers and perform the fealty ceremony. To become a blue robe, one first needed to perform a rite wherein one would vow to serve the gods. It brought to mind memories of when I had performed it myself, only this time I'll be leading the prayers. After swallowing my nerves and carrying out the fealty ceremony, I started giving the children their robes. Hopefully they would work hard and grow as people. Now, allow me to explain life in the temple. Everyone would eat breakfast at second bell, then go to the high priest's chambers with their attendants to receive work and instructions from Hartmut or his attendants. That was also when they would report on the day before and detail the progress they had made. From there, they would work in their chambers and study religious ceremonies until third bell, where they would move to the orphanage to study noble matters such as written lessons and the harpsichord under Wilma's and Rosina's tutelage. Fourth bell was lunch, then the children would generally be allowed to spend the afternoon as they pleased. They could train, go to the workshop to help out or speak with merchants, transcribe books, study to be a knight, scholar, or whatever they wanted to be when they were older, study the printing and papermaking industries, and so on. They could even go to the castle as long as they got permission first. Sixth bell marks dinner time, I said. This is probably earlier than you are used to, but those in the orphanage will need to wait even longer if we took our meals any later. As for when you go to bed, however, that is up to you. Are there any questions? One boy raised his hand. Are the children in the orphanage following the same schedule? Not exactly. They must clean the temple, gather in the forest, work in the orphanage, and perform other such duties. That said, you will get to spend time with them during evenings when your work has been completed and on rainy days. The coming of spring meant the orphans would be going outside more, which also meant they wouldn't have as much time to study. I intended to have their work called early on some days so that they could have at least some evenings for studying, but everyone in the orphanage needed to be treated equally, hence why the blue robes would receive time off as well. No matter whether they were nobles, commoners, or the children of criminals, they would each receive as much work and as much food as the others. Can we go to the forest too? Nicholas asked, a hopeful glint in his eye. I shook my head and plainly replied, Blue robes are not allowed to go to the forest, I'm afraid. If we allowed the children of nobles to go, and something happened to them, the blame would swiftly fall on the commoners, specifically Gil Ludson, the eldest resident of the orphanage, and the guards who had allowed them to pass. I wasn't going to take any chances. Now head to your rooms and with your respective attendants and get changed, I said. The children in the orphanage are waiting for you, so please make the most of this opportunity to spend time with them. To help the blue robes ease into their new lives at the temple, they hadn't been assigned any work today. Well, they would need to tour the temple's facilities after lunch, but that was about it. I'd also wanted to spend a whole while introducing the Rosemine Workshop's books, which were stored in the temple bookroom as well as in the orphanage, but everyone else had rejected that idea. They said that my impassioned recommendations would make the children less likely to read the books. Is that mean or what? Rosemine, will you be going to the orphanage too? Melkor asked, blue robes in hand. I nodded in response. I wanted to hear the children's thoughts about spring life, since it meant leaving the orphanage more often. Shall we go together then? There is something I wish to report as well. Melkor then went to get changed. In the meantime, I asked Hartmut how work in the temple was progressing. Freetek had done his very best over spring prayer, but we still weren't up to date. Losing those brew priests has had much of a greater impact than I expected, I said. But we now have new apprentice blue probes and can pile work onto their attendants, Hartmut replied with a beaming smile. It was losing Lord Ferdinand that wounded us the most. Oh, have the specifics of the Archduke Conference Starbind ceremony been decided yet? It seems that the Sovereign Temple will prepare the divine instruments, offerings, and such. I will merely be holding our Bible and wearing my ceremonial robes. Each Bible needed to be registered with its owner's mana, so you couldn't just borrow one from somebody else. Even if the Sovereign High Bishop had given me permission to use his, there wouldn't have been much of a point, as much as the text was invisible. It wouldn't be of any use. Do not forget your most important helper, Lady Rosemine. I will be attending as High Priest to support you. I did not forget you, Hartmut. I simply knew that you would come along no matter what I or anyone else said. After seeing him force his way into the Royal Academy ceremonies, I couldn't imagine a reality where he stayed in Ehrenfest and patiently waited my return. Next, I turned to my knights. Speaking of the ceremony, the royal family has permitted me to bring some guards, but they must be dressed as blue priests or shrine maidens. I would like my adult knights to accompany me, but are you all willing? Absolutely, Angelica replied without missing a beat. I am your guard knight, after all. Cornelius and Daniel agreed as well. They had already worn robes for the dedication ritual. Lenore nodded too. Furthermore, I continued, at the Royal Family's instructions, I am to spend the rest of the Archduke Conference hidden in the library's underground archive. I will need guards and attendants there as well, but only archnobles can enter. Cornelius, Lenore, I intend to ask you both to guard me, but Adelie is my only choice for attendance. Would it be wise of me to give her this duty? I am particularly concerned about Clarissa. Clarissa was due to attend the Archduke Conference, where she would play a key role in our negotiations with Dunkelfelder. We naturally wanted Adelie to keep an eye on her, but that wouldn't be possible if she was accompanying me in the underground archive. It was a potentially dangerous situation indeed. My mother is your retainer, Hartmut said. It is only natural that she should join you. My father is going to be there as well, and Clarissa would never do anything to bother you. Well, probably not. You had me in the first half, but what was that last part, Hartmut? An unease washed over me. Lenore smiled and said, Fear not, Lady Rosemine. Lisletta may not be able to enter the archive, but she can take care of everything else. From preparing tea to managing your chambers. In my opinion, it would be best for Adelie to join you. At times like this, when I needed to leave the temple and carry myself as a proper noble, Riarda's absence became all the more painful. That said, the Archducal couple had it a lot worse. They wouldn't get to hide away in an underground archive. I sighed. If only Daniel could read through the old documents with me. From the very bottom of my heart, I am glad that I cannot enter an archive for royals and archduke candidates, Daniel interjected, trembling. I would die of stress. If entering an archive was too much for him, was he really okay with attending the two royal starbinding? He would need to don blue robes and stand atop the shrine in front of every single archducal couple in Jurgenschmidt. The answer was probably no, but I decided not to say anything. Giving him a way out would leave me with one fewer guard on the day. Well, I'm not sure he'll survive. Good luck. I'm sure he'll survive. Good luck, Daniel. Because I'm underage, I wasn't able to help but spring prayerfully muttered, overcome with disappointment. I won't be able to attend this Archduke conference for the same reason. No matter what I do, I can't be of any use to you. That isn't true, Daniel said, trying to cheer her up. We need people to look after the temple, while Hartman and Lady Rosamund are away. You're a huge help to us all. I'm glad to hear you say that, Felina replied, her cheeks blushing crimson as she smiled up at him. Was she beaming? She seemed positively radiant. Wait, what? She practically has hearts in her eyes. Doesn't she like Roderick? I'm pretty sure Daniel said she likes Roderick. No, he's mistaken. She likes Daniel. As I stared at them in confusion, Melkor re-entered the room, having finished changing. I would have liked to have leave Hartman here in his chambers so that he could continue with his work, but he insisted on coming with us to the orphanage. After witnessing me break and reform my face stone for the children, he was convinced that I might once again do something extraordinary out of the blue. I tried to explain that nothing was going to happen, but he refused to believe me. I couldn't understand why. Dude, I still think that he knows who she is, really. Oh my god. If he does, I am like, how did he find out is what I wonder. If he actually knows about her being a commoner in the past, how did he find out? That's what I wonder. Did he just put two and two together when he saw her interacting with Thule, Gunter, and Effa? Or did he say, I don't know, anyway. I don't know, I'd like to find out. I started toward the orphanage with Melkor, walking at a slow pace. He told me that his reports about spring prayer had surprised Sylvester, and that he had been praised for passing on the soldiers' messages. Right now, I'm memorizing the prayers you taught me so that I can join in the harvest festival. Everyone in the castle was up to their eyes in work, but there wasn't anything that Melkor could do to help. This had made him feel useless and isolated, which made him want to come to the temple as soon as possible. By the way, did you get a report too, he asked? About what? The silver cloth they found in the former Gibbs' Gerlach's estate. Lorenz and Matthias had assisted with that investigation, but they hadn't yet reported their findings to me. They were on duty tomorrow, and my intention was for us to discuss the matter then. Lord Bonifacius said that it was strange, Melkor continued. So the scholars examined it. Turns out he was right. I don't really understand why, though. I thought you might be able to explain it better. Yeah, the most I know is that it was weird. There isn't much more I could say. I promised to give him a better explanation once I was abreast of the situation myself, and it was then that we reached the orphanage. Instead, we could see children in blue robes playing with the orphans. Melkor, I said, please go play with the others. I need to speak with Wilma. Okay. I watched as Melkor mingled with the other children and asked Wilma about the recent stay of the orphanage. She shot a worried glance toward the stairs before she answered. Some of the children have lost motivation since the others left. The children growing up without magic tools of their own were having to expand their mana using the tools in their family's estate. Most had assumed that only the heir of each house would receive a tool and be treated as a noble, but because everyone was gathered in the orphanage, they had soon realized the truth. Some houses gave magic tools to the younger siblings as well. They had stayed strong by telling themselves that their families still needed them, she continued, but when nobody came, they lost the will to work hard. The disheartened children boasted more mana and stats than the lay noble children who had been taken back. But they didn't have magic tools. On top of that, they were no longer needed by their parents. Even if they returned home, they would simply be made into servants and spend their time fueling their house's magic tools. Working hard in the orphanage wouldn't magically turn them into nobles, so they were now wasting each day with their heads in the clouds. Hartman, I said, even if the children were given their magic tools now, it would still be too late for them, right? Conrad had needed to give up on being a noble after losing his. Not necessarily, it would depend on their mana quantities and the number of rejuvenation potions they had access to. That said, forcibly rejuvenating one's mana and trying to force it all into a magic tool would place a tremendous burden on one's body. And the combined cost of the magic tool and the rejuvenation potions will not be cheap. It was by this means that the apprentice blue priests were returned to noble society after the Civil War. Of course, these apprentice blue priests had needed some financial support from their family to be able to afford the method. I had been on the verge of giving up, but I at least wanted to try Hartman's suggestion. However, he continued looking down at me, I cannot allow you to shoulder the burden of preparing magic tools and rejuvenation potions for every child in the orphanage. You will only be High Bishop for 3 more years. We cannot continue to support abandoned children in that fashion once you are gone. And it would violate the orphanage's code of equality. Not to mention, what would drive you to go to such lengths for the sake of children from the former Veronica faction? If you stick your neck out for them, expect to be swarmed by families who believe their children deserve magic tools as well. Under no circumstances can you put orphans under highest priority. I clapped my hands together in realization. Well, consider it from another angle. I am going out of my way to save not just those of the former Veronica faction, but all of the children under my jurisdiction in the orphanage. It does not matter what faction they are from, nor whether they are nobles or commoners with the devouring. I will assist them all preserving the orphanage's code of equality. Lady Rosemine, Hartman said, his eyes wide, then he shrugged. We cannot come to a decision ourselves. The Ob must choose whether to execute your idea. Perhaps you could invite him to reobtain his divine protections? Ooh, divine protections all around! Woo woo! Sylvester, grandfather, I'm glad to see you both. I had told Sylvester I wanted to discuss something when he came for the ritual, and he had arrived with Bonifacius in tow. The latter's distaste for the temple must have diminished since his previous visit. Melkor and I guided our two visitors and their retainers to the High Bishop's chambers, then gave them tea and sweets while asking about the castle. I had already received a report from Felina and Clarissa in my library, and my other retainers had given me information, too, but it was important to hear things from a variety of perspectives. Everyone in Sylvester's sphere was fully dedicated to preparing for the Archduke Conference. He's mentioned that I should praise Clarissa in particular since he was working especially hard to get Ehrenfest ready for its negotiations with Dunkelfelder. Naturally, we can't give her full access to everything when she's only recently come of age and hasn't even married into Ehrenfest yet, Sylvester said. Lebrecht is limiting what information she's given, and she'll only be attending our discussion with Dunkelfelder. Still, her passion and attention to detail are inspiring everyone around her. Clarissa was approaching her work with almost obsessive fervor. I wanted to believe she was trying to make up for how much trouble she had caused us all, but Hartman had revealed that she was actually just desperate to keep her place in the Archduke Conference's group, since it was the only way she could get to see me perform the Starbind ceremony. Well, better than not being motivated to work, I guess. Together with some of the scholars, the Knight's Order has been investigating the silver cloth found at the former Giebgarlax's estate, Bonifacius said. Lorenzo and Matthias have given you an overview, I assume? I nodded, who was referring to the same silver cloth that Melkor had mentioned. When they first came to serve in the temple, Lorenzo and Matthias said the cloth rejected any kind of mana, but had told me little else. Bonifacius had apparently coerced them into silence so that he could report to me himself. In the words of my two apprentice knights, he had wanted me to invite him here to ask about the cloth. His bias against the temple was less extreme than before, but he still wasn't willing to come without a good reason or an invitation. Melkor told me first, I replied, then I received a report from Lorenzo and Matthias the next day. I still don't quite understand what the cloth is, though. I've been looking forward to hearing a proper explanation from you, grandfather. Bonifacius grinned. We learned something new just yesterday. Sylvester's already been told, so we can discuss it while he's performing the ritual. He turned to Sylvester and started shooing him away. Go on, then. Knowing what your memory's like, it won't be long before you start forgetting the gods' names again. To his credit, Sylvester didn't get mad at all. Desperate for some alone time with your granddaughter, huh? He asked, Bonifacius returning a grin of his own as he stood up. Ferdinand once said that a discussion with Rosemine can boggle the mind, so yeah, I'll do my ritual first. Lead the way. Allow me, father, Melkor declared, standing up with his blue robes. I deliberately learned the way to the chapel and preparing the offerings so that I could assist you. Thus, overflowing with motivation, he marched toward the door with his retainers. Sylvester followed after him and said, Tell me about the other kids. We can't really discuss this in the castle, can we? I turned to Bonifacius, so eager for his report that I was leaning forward despite myself. Now then, do tell me about the silver cloth. Lorenzo and Matthias told me only that it contains no mana at all. It said that I should ask you for any further details. Well, this is the cloth in question, Bonifacius said, and pulled it out for me to see. I asked for his permission to take it, then examined it closely. The large silver cloth was about as large as the palm of my hand. One side was smooth, while the other was frayed and uneven, indicating that it was torn. Otherwise, it appeared to be a normal piece of cloth. I don't understand what was so strange about it. There's nothing unusual about it not containing any mana, is there? I asked. Most of the clothes worn by commoners are made with such cloth. Even the mana-dyed cloth that we nobles use slowly loses its mana over time. The cloth you're holding hasn't simply been drained of mana, nor is its mana capacity too low for us to sense. Under such circumstances, it would have been possible to channel some more mana into it or improve its capacity. Rather, that cloth contains absolutely no mana at all, and none can be poured into it. According to the scholars, the cloth had been made exclusively from mana-less materials, using a process that likewise didn't require any mana. Materials that don't contain any mana? I asked. This is my first time hearing of such a thing. Jurgen Smith was enriched first with the mana of the Zent, then with the mana of the Obs, and Giebs across its many territories. In other words, everything contained at least some mana. One could make leather that didn't conduct it using materials from fey beasts or fey plants that were resistant to or reflected mana, but that was about it. The materials themselves still contained mana. The silver cloth found in Gerlach's summer estate was deliberately torn, Bonifacius said. How strange that he would go to the effort when he was trying to escape and already short on time. Perhaps he was in a rush, I ventured. I'd assumed that he'd gotten it caught in a door during his rush to leave the estate, but the looks on my knights' faces implied that none of them agreed with me. In a situation where one's cape gets caught in a door or the like, it would make much more sense to cut it with Messer, Cornelius explained. Knights are taught to form their staffs as quickly as possible, and a weak scholar would surely choose a spell over brute strength. Tearing the cloth by hand wouldn't have been appropriate behavior for a proper noble, and it would have wasted too much time during a last-minute escape. That was why it had caught Bonifacius' attention. In a situation like that, my commoner instincts would have kicked in for sure. Using my staff wouldn't have even occurred to me. In that case, why was the cloth torn, I asked. Remember how I asked that it doesn't interact with mana, Bonifacius replied. It cannot be cut with a staff-formed weapon. He then signaled to his retainer and said prepare the stand. And once the retainer plugged the silver cloth atop some boards stacked on the table. Bonifacius used Messer to morph his staff into a knife, which he then brought down on the cloth with unstoppable force. There was a booming crash as the boards shattered, but the cloth atop it hadn't even been pierced. It had done nothing to cushion the impact, but mana couldn't pass through it at all. You can see now why he tore it, Bonifacius concluded. From there, the most troubling part of the cloth was its ability to pass through the border barrier. Excuse me? The ob cannot detect the passing of small amounts of mana, such as that of commoners. You remember this, I expect. It follows, then, that a cloth through which mana cannot pass at all would not be detected either. Where did he get it, though? Curious, Bonifacius had decided to experiment. He had asked Sylvester to form a small, simple barrier through which he had poked a finger dropped in the silver cloth. Sylvester hadn't been able to detect it at all. So, the former Geeb Gerlach could surely have escaped the duchy, I asked. Exactly. We believe he used this cloth to pass through the barrier. Questions remain, however. How did he get it from the noble's quarter to Gerlach? And where did they get the cloth in the first place? I paused, racking my brain for answers. Assuming he was completely wrapped in the cloth, could he have used a teleportation circle for objects? No, the cloth contains no mana at all, so the teleportation circle would neither detect it nor activate. We tried ourselves, but nothing we wrapped in the cloth was a teleport, no matter how small. The scholars had apparently asked the same question, and using the cloth tried to get living things to teleport as objects. They hadn't been successful. However, Bonifacius continued, in the hidden room where we found the cloth, we also came across traces of something having been burned. Matthias told us that his father would always burn any teleportation circles he used to commit misdeeds, so it seems very likely that he used one for something. Father used magic tools to burn teleportation circles he had no further use for, Matthias added. I expect that he tried to burn the silver cloth as well, but his immunity to mana meant it was unaffected. Bonifacius crossed his arms and nodded. Under any other circumstances, I expect he might have been a lot more thorough about removing evidence, but he was in a room that only his blood relatives could enter. He likely never thought that Matthias would be spared, let alone that he would assist us with our investigation. But aren't relatives normally brought in to help with such investigations, I asked? Matthias had been safe at the Royal Academy, so it seemed obvious that he would have helped out. Bonifacius shook his head with a frown. Opening a hidden room requires the mana of someone registered to it. So that might seem like a good idea, but such people would already be in mana-sealing bracelets. Removing said bracelets wouldn't be an option either. By no means could we allow the relative of a criminal to enter a hidden room potentially filled with dangerous magic tools. The investigating knights wouldn't know what magic tools were being stored in the hidden room or where they were being kept. Taking a relative there without the appropriate mana restraints would introduce all sorts of risks. Perhaps they would attempt a suicidal counterattack with whatever they had available. The best we could do by ourselves was look for evidence and search through memories with the ob's permission, he explained. Of course, the truck had greatly limited which memories we could access, and trying to view them by force risked doing serious harm to the person being searched. Especially when their mana was ill-matched and they were resisting the entire time. I expect that Geeb Gerlach believed he had eliminated everything that might trace him back to his doings, including Matthias himself. I can say with all certainty that he did not expect his son or Lorenz to betray him to protect the children of the former Veronica faction. Nor did it occur to him that the Ob might have offered to spare their lives. We could only include them in our investigation because they had given their names to members of the archducal family who had ordered them not to resist. They were extremely helpful, and their assistance enabled us to find valuable evidence in items. There is no mistaking that. Bonifacius was showering Lorenz and Matthias with praise, but I could instinctively feel the mood growing heavier. I sat up straight, suddenly more anxious than before. He continued, we were so determined to save these young boys' lives that you decided to use any means necessary. That led you to propose that the children of criminals be given a chance to give their names. The Ob acknowledged your suggestion, and those who went along with it were spared. Lord Bonifacius, I think you're mistaken, Hartman interjected. To begin with, it was the Ob who... Bonifacius raised a hand and silenced the protest with a single glare. Rosemine first made the suggestion for Viscount Dolduf, did she not? She was acting out of compassion and was relieved when so many were eventually spared. She might even have considered it a good thing. He inhaled slowly, then gave me a stern look. However, I want you to know that as a consequence, some believe you have stomped on the pride and dignity of others, that you threatened them with death to acquire their servitude. Name-swearing is supposed to be a sacred act. Even now, I do not support it being used to allow the families of criminals to escape punishment. I recognized those eyes. Roderick had given me the same look while saying exactly the same thing. My heart grew heavy. I didn't regret saving Matthias and the others, not in the slightest. I was glad to have found a way to spare those who hadn't committed any crimes. Yet at the same time, I never really stopped to consider how they felt. I'd never considered the fact that I was stomping on their pride. Now that you have set this precedent, he went on, others will come forth, also swelling to swear their names to avoid punishment. It might even spread to other duchies. Nowhere is there such an abundance of nobles that execution is a simple task. If swearing one's name for this reason becomes common, then those who would have given theirs out of genuine fealty will start having second thoughts. Lest they be misconstrued as criminals themselves, it will have fundamentally changed the meaning of name-swearing. It felt as though he had just dumped a bucket of cold water over me. That reality had never even crossed my mind, and now I couldn't keep my fist from trembling. I never expected this to turn into such a big issue. My only intention had been to save lives, but at the same time I supposed that my own naivete was to blame. Sylvester always permits your unique ideas, Bonifacio said. He even said that he would take the blame for any negative consequences they might have. In his words, his reputation is already so poor that few new controversies would not change anything. Did you know that? I shook my head. Sylvester had never said anything of the sort to me. I really am sorry. I didn't stop to consider those consequences. Rosamund, I see your desire to save lives as nothing short of a virtue, but you must consider both the influence your authority has on society and the damage that can come from modifying traditions. As I understand it, the implementations of so many seemingly minor changes over the years is why religious ceremonies in the temple in general are now viewed so poorly. You saw with your own eyes how much something so simple as a new high bishop can change the atmosphere of the temple. All of a sudden, Bonifacio seemed to relax. But, that's enough lecturing for me, I think. No need to shed any tears. In an ideal world, it wouldn't have fallen to me to tell you all this. Such remonstration should come from your parents, of whom you have plenty, and your retainers share the blame for not daring to admonish you when you truly need it. I am sick of doing the dirty work and receiving so much ire for it. He then turned to my retainers and said, Get a grip, you lot. Pay more heed to your lady's actions, such that she doesn't need to make more enemies and turn the people against her. Our sincerest apologies. No sooner had my retainers cried out than a bell rang on the other side of the door. Sylvester's ritual was evidently finished. He laughed, marching through the door with a victorious grin. I got 21 divine protections. Dang, dude! You got half of what Lady Rosemine's got. Nice! Coupled with the ones I got before, I might just beat you, Rosemine. The tension weighing down on us all had vanished, though we struggled to immediately match Sylvester's enthusiasm. I see, I said. I suppose all those years of prayer really did pay off. Not to mention I got the life element, so now I'm omni-elemental. Nice! I don't know how much prayer it takes to get new elements, but this seems pretty important, huh? If praying while supplying one's foundation became customary for archducal families, I can only assume that we would all eventually become omni-elemental. Wait, omni-elemental? I exclaimed, does that mean you got Abelglave's divine protection? Nah, I didn't get it from him, but from the subordinates, Darliban and Schlaftrom. There was also, actually, forget it. Not something to be said in polite company. Wait, let me guess. Beischmat? In socially acceptable terms, Beischmat was most associated with vigorous nighttime endeavors. What the fuck, dude? Have you been screwing Florencia's whole lot this whole time? Oh my god! Dude, you just outed yourself as having a lot of sex. Oh my god. I wasn't sure whether my guess was correct, but I wasn't going to ask with Melkor in the room. Instead, I put on a vague smile and pretended to know. Anyway, they might have been subordinates, but I got plenty of life protection from them. Did, something happen, by the way? I heard your retainers apologize from all the way outside. What did Bonifacio say to them? He carefully scanned the room, clearly more interested in changing the subject than anything else. I simply scolded them for not being on top of things, Bonifacius replied, keeping the details vague. Don't want them thinking they can protect Rosemond the way they're going. I decided not to reveal too much either, so rather than telling Sylvester that I now know what great lengths he was going to for my sake, I merely offered him a seat and smiled as Fran poured some tea. Before my lecture, we were trying to figure out where in the world Geep Gerlach might have gotten that cloth, Bonifacius explained. I see, Sylvester murmured. Yeah, that's important. It might be a new magic tool that hasn't been announced anywhere. I'm not sure we can go about calling it a magic tool. It doesn't contain any mana whatsoever. Putting aside my pointless nitpick, I recall what Geep Kernberger had said to me about Bosges. Actually, I was told that face stones are seldom found in other countries, so maybe this material that doesn't contain any mana came from one of them? Monolith materials couldn't be found in Jurgensmith, but maybe they were available in other countries? I hadn't heard anything about this, not even during our Archduke conference. Jurgensmith was trading with other countries up until the Civil War, but I don't remember us importing any cloth like this. Wait. Ferdinand and the others were dealing with an envoy from Lanzanov, which is another country. Is it possible they got some of that silver cloth from them, but Ferdinand doesn't know this? And Georgine sent that to Gerlach to use, so he could escape into Arensbach. That would be possible. Bonifacius nodded in agreement. Well, face stones were one of our country's chief exports before the Civil War, I said. It wouldn't surprise me if any of the countries receiving them went through a lot of changes, too, after their supply was abruptly cut off. Even back on Earth, when we had started running out of oil, we had desperately began searching for alternative energy sources. It was an extremely obvious course of action to preserve one's existing resources while searching for something new to use. If news of the Bosges gates closure had reached other countries, then it was possible that they had started preparing for if their own gate were closed too. They might even have decided to keep their trump cards secret instead of presenting them during the Archduke conference. If the former Geep Gerlach is alive, I can't imagine he went anywhere but Arensbach, Bonifacius used. Plus, Arensbach is the only duchy that still has an open country gate. It might still have a connection to the other countries. He paused, clearly deep in thought, then shook his head and muttered this kind of thinking was Ferdinand's job. Then let us ask him, I asked. He can look into whether Lanzanov has any similar cloth. Above all else, though, we need to inform him of the dangers in Arensbach. Geep Gerlach might be there now, and this mana-immune cloth seems like a serious threat to us nobles. Not even Ferdinand would be able to put up a fight if someone used the cloth to block his every attack. He's in more danger than any of us right now. Not to mention, although we had only found a scrap of cloth, it seemed reasonable to assume that the same material might have been used to make weapons and armor as well. If either Geep Gerlach or Georgine had such equipment, well, one would need some very carefully thought-out countermeasures to stand a chance. Sylvester won't object to us informing Ferdinand, I'm sure, Bonifacius said. However, if Arensbach's sensors pick up on our warnings, we'll only make the situation worse. Do you have a means of passing their checks? Sylvester does. He's got ways of secret code of communicating with them. I could only blink in response. Bonifacius was smiling at me, but his blue eyes were intently watching my every move. Sylvester was doing the same. It felt entirely like they were testing me, and now that I thought about it, Ferdinand had told me to keep our shining ink a secret. After putting on my best fake smile, I placed a hand on my cheek and quizzically cocked my head. Is it not Sylvester who does? He said as much during dinner. The best I could do is perhaps ask Ferdinand's disciple Raymond to give him a letter or a message from us when I return to the Royal Academy? Or maybe I could try and find a moment to speak with him at the Archduke conference during the Starbind ceremony? Do you have any better ideas, grandfather? Bonifacius' expression softened a little, then he shook his head at me and said, nope. Seeing the sharpness in his eyes fade away made me want a sigh of relief. Sylvester looked at me and stroked his chin. I'm sorry to say this, Rosamund, but Ferdinand won't be attending the Archduke conference. Ab Arensbach passed away a few days ago, and now Lady Linda needs to dye her foundation. It's best that her mana not change until the process is complete, so their Starbind ceremony is being delayed until next year. Ferdinand had sent to Sylvester a letter to that effect. In it, he also mentioned that he would be participating in Arensbach's spring prayer, which meant we would need to adjust our response a little. It's being delayed an entire year, I asked. Then what's happening with Ferdinand? What do you mean? His wedding can't be held until the foundation has been dyed, so will he be able to return to Ehrenfest? Or will they at least give him a hidden room? I asked anxiously. Going an entire season without somewhere to relax was bad enough, but a whole year? Bonifacius gave me a look of his slight exasperation. What are you getting so worked up about? He won't be able to return unless his engagement is cancelled. Well, and in any case, it's normal not to be given a hidden room until you're married. Another year is a fairly long time, but it isn't something for you to worry about. Isn't it, though? My eyes flitted between Sylvester and Boniface, which elicited a sigh from the former. It seems that you don't have the best understanding of noble weddings, he said, then turned to Boniface. I'll take care of this, uncle. Why don't you go perform your divine protections ritual? I suppose I will, Boniface replied. Melkor, if you would. He left the room, though he kept glancing back at me on his way out. Once he was gone and the door was once again shut, Sylvester let out a heavy sigh and looked me straight in the eye. Rosemine, what's your relationship with Ferdinand? I tilted my head, not at all sure where his question had come from. It seemed a bit late to be asking something like that. Shouldn't you know that already, I asked. Ferdinand is my guardian. He's someone who looks after me. What's more is there to say? He's like a father! Karstead, who was standing behind Sylvester as his guard, smiled in approval of my response. I thought that might be the case. Ferdinand must feel the same way. Exactly. What, was that not obvious? Sylvester paused as if mustering his courage and looked over everyone in the room, including our retainers. By noble standards, Rosemine, your relationship with Ferdinand is unusually close. I nodded and replied, right, but I didn't have a clue what he meant. To begin with, what were these noble standards he was referring to? Sylvester must have noticed my complete lack of understanding because after exchanging a look with Karstead, he attempted to elaborate. Look, he said, clearly struggling to get the words out. The truth is, there's a rumor that you're in love with Ferdinand. This is news to me. I have no idea what might have caused it. My response caused a stir among our retainers. Some cleared their throats in apparent discomfort, while others exchanged surprised murmurs. Again, I was completely lost. Yes, it was true that I trusted Ferdinand more than I trusted any other noble. He was like family to me, and I loved him as much as I did Ledger Tully. But was I in love with him? Where had this assumption even come from? Is there a reason for this misinterpretation, I asked? Karstead's brow furrowed in a very reluctant frown. Well, it isn't too strange for a guardian to give his estate to his charge, but rarely are the staff and furniture kept the same. Ferdinand opted to leave the rooms as they were. He also put his valuables in your care and trusts you to send them to him as he needs them. It, really is a bit much. By managing the estate for Ferdinand and doing what he asked of me, I was apparently doing the job that most people would have trusted the women of their family. Excuse me, I said. Eckert and Justice can rely on Mother and Riard to send them their belongings, but Ferdinand doesn't have a mother to do that for him, does he? Besides, the most I would really do is tell the attendant he left behind what he wants. I don't see the issue. It wasn't like I was personally loading his things for him. At most, I would send an ordinance to Losfam who would take care of the rest. How people could see that as even remotely romantic was beyond me. Plus, Ferdinand wasn't even living in Ehrenfest anymore. He had moved to Ahrensbach 2 seasons ago. Why were such rumors spreading now of all times? Under normal circumstances, those who leave home to marry into another duchy take all of their belongings with them, Karstead explained. Ferdinand wasn't able to do that, though. Because he was summoned to Ahrensbach on such short notice, he had to leave his things here for another season. That reminded me, Clarissa had gone to Framblatag's border gate to pick up her belongings, and she had announced upon returning that she now had absolutely everything she needed. This wasn't really important, but my understanding was that people moving to another duchy didn't usually bring too many clothes with them. Instead, they ordered new ones that better matched their fashion sense of their new home. They mostly brought underclothes which were unseen and therefore didn't need to be stylish. By leaving his belongings at home, Karstead continued, Ferdinand is making it seem like he hopes for a divorce. Well, I kind of hope he does. I don't think he wants to stay in Ahrensbach, to be completely honest. He wants to be in Ehrenfest, where it's his home, it's his geduld. Wait, really? I asked. Is this marriage going to be okay then? We sent him more of his luggage in the spring, but only what he requested. His rooms aren't yet empty or anything. Naturally, I omitted the fact that Losfam was eagerly waiting to be called over as well once things were ready. Sylvester stared at me wide-eyed and said, I think I should manage Ferdinand's belongings from now on. Can't keep leaving them to you. Karstead looked equally taken aback. Why not, I asked. Above all else, because Ferdinand ceased being your guardian when he moved to Ahrensbach. Now, seasons later, everyone sees your relationship in a different light. You should wise up and do the same. You aren't his charge anymore. He isn't your guardian. There was nothing wrong with my receiving his estate. The issue was that our relationship hadn't changed after the fact. Karstead crossed his arms, frowning once again. You're probably thinking that this has all come out of nowhere, but the truth is that our perception was just as naive as yours. It was only after people started warning us of the problem that we noticed it ourselves. You've also matured quite a bit. In a physical sense, that is. You've gotten taller, and now you actually look old enough to be attending the Royal Academy. Our knowledge of your situation made us slow on the uptake, but people no longer see you as a mere child admiring her guardian. I gazed down at my body. The hem of my dresses had needed to be lengthened after I woke up from the Dreeve, and everyone had assured me that I was now old enough to be a student, but now nobody had treated me any differently. That was probably because, at the time, I'd I looked as though I hadn't even been baptized yet. I'd even appeared to be younger than Wilfred and Charlotte owing to our heights. Now, however, the way that people viewed me had started to change. I'd celebrated the fact that I was growing at last, but I also hadn't realized how much of an impact it would have on how others saw me and the things I did. Also, Sylvester hesitantly continued, some people have been voicing their concerns that you are too worried about Ferdinand now living in Ahrensbach and think you are not even half as worried about your fiancé. And they're right, I said. If someone asked me whether I was more worried about Ferdinand or Wilfred right now, my answer would absolutely be the former. Karstad went... hello! Ferdinand essentially is family to her. He's like Lutz and Thule to her. Of course she's going to be worried about him, especially because he's in enemy territory right now! Do you guys not realize that? He's in enemy territory right now. He's your brother. He's your cousin. Good God. Worry about him. Yes, he can take care of himself, but there are some things he might not be able to handle out there. Like that cough, for example. Of course he's going to worry about him. Karstad winced while Sylvester smacked a hand against his own forehead and groaned. Had I said something wrong? I watched them both carefully as they continued their display of exasperation. It wasn't long before Karstad was face-palming and Sylvester was crossing his arms while staring at the ceiling in thought. Wilfred, she's not really romantically interested in Wilfred. It's only like a politically convenient marriage that this is going on anyway. So of course she's not going to be interested in him. After a moment, Sylvester returned his attention to me, evidently conflicted. Look. Could you also show some concern for your fiancé, he asked. He's facing lies gangs almost entirely by himself, you know. He has some of my concern. I advised him to let some time pass before approaching the lies gangs, and I've actively tried to share my intelligence with him. However, no matter what happens, I will always prioritize Ferdinand. Why? I met his eye and said, Wilfred may technically be my fiancé, but consider all the roles Ferdinand played for my sake. As my guardian, he did a veritable mountain of work in my stead. As my mentor, he granted me books, knowledge, and the perspective needed to survive in noble society. And as my doctor, he paid closer attention to my health than anybody else. He has granted me so much while Wilfred grants me almost nothing. We've also spent so much more time together, too. Duh! Hello! Wilfred has given her nothing. He's never even checked up on her when she's fallen ill. I have to agree with Brunhilde and the others on this one. To be frank, it was pointless to even compare the two. In terms of my appreciation, they were in completely different worlds. Not to mention, I continued, although you say that Wilfred is fighting this battle alone, he has two considerable parents doting on him, as well as Charlotte and Melkor to provide assistance whenever he needs it. Even I can, and do, help him as long as it doesn't interfere with my temple work. How can you expect me to worry about him as much as I do about Ferdinand? I love Thule and the others, but I didn't spend any of my days worrying about whether they had enough food to eat, whether their lives were in danger, or anything like that. Ferdinand, however, was stranded in Ahrensbach without a workshop or a hidden room. He was always up to his eyes in work and wary of everyone but the two trustworthy retainers by his side. Aside from them, it was nobody with whom he could speak openly. He also had a tendency to skip meals and go without sleep when he was busy. Even on the occasion when he did eat, he was so wary of poison that he refused to touch anything unfamiliar. Worst of all, Ferdinand was engaged to a girl who looked identical to Veronica. Had he been living an easy and carefree life in Ahrensbach, I wouldn't have needed to worry about him as much. Should the day come when Wilfred starts prioritizing work over his basic needs, all the while sustaining himself with rejuvenation potions and ignoring his retainers' every call to rest, then I will worry about him and Ferdinand in equal measure. But that hasn't happened yet, has it? In fact, I don't believe he's acting at all out of the ordinary. Sylvester and our retainers were speechless, while Karstad rubbed his brow and muttered, so that's how you decide whom to be concerned about. Yes! Of course he's going to be concerned about Ferdinand. His health and his well-being are suffering because of what he does. When she's not worrying about him, when she's not trying to get him to eat, when she's trying to get him to sleep, trying to get him to not do as much work. Hello? He needs that help. He needs that worry. Wilfred does not. He does not do any of that. He's fine. She doesn't have to worry about him nearly as much because of that. Ferdinand doesn't even have a really good support base in Ahrensbach. He's surrounded by enemies who probably would kill him if he didn't let his guard down for a moment. Is there something wrong with that, Father? Well, don't people usually base such priorities on familiarity or closeness? You're at an age where you should get along better with your fiancé than your guardian. So you were my age when you got close with Mother, Or forget I said anything. He cleared his throat and averted his gaze, trying to avoid the subject, but the awkward gesture told me everything I needed to know. He had started getting cozy with Elvira around then. Karstedt wanted me to behave more like my age, but that was exactly the problem. I'd spent 22 years on Earth before coming to this world, meaning I was now well into my adulthood. Wilfred, on the other hand, was still only a child. I struggled to see him as someone my age, let alone develop romantic feelings for him. At the very least, he'd need to be as old as I was when I died. Still, aren't you worried about him? Karstedt asked me. You're aware of the trouble with the lies gangs. Like I said, I do feel some concern for him. I attempted to share intelligence with his retainers and even made him a protective charm. He was anything but receptive, though. He refused to accept any information from me and wouldn't even thank me for the charm I gave him. I'd expected at least a thank you message delivered through his retainers, but no, he hadn't even sent me an ordinance to confirm that he had received the charm. Was he pleased with it? Did he think I was overstepping? I didn't have a clue, and I certainly wasn't motivated to make him another. To be honest, I was so busy and saw him so infrequently these days that I sometimes forgot he even existed. He was definitely in the wrong there, Sylvester said. I can't excuse him for that. Oh, also, I was going to advise him not to clamor for the Lies King's support and to instead take his time, but my retainers stopped me. They said that he was too wounded from what he had experienced during spring prayer and would only lash out at me in response. Sylvester exhaled. No surprises there. Chances are they weren't wrong either, Karstedt added, sighing as well. Everyone seemed convinced that the best course of action was to keep Wilfred in the dark. He was acting aloof, sure, but was that really the best response? I told Sylvester about the vague things Cornelius and the others had said to me, then launched into my main questions. So what state is Wilfred in right now exactly? Should I refrain from approaching him as my retainers advise? Sylvester took a moment to consider his answer while his retainers and Karstedt all watched with troubled frowns. For now, yeah, Sylvester eventually replied. I think we can all agree that Wilfred needs to accept a few truths, no matter how unpleasant they might be. But I could also say the same for you, Rosemary. I think the two of you should stay apart until you can both accept things for what they are. I'm not sure I understand, I said, cocking my head at him. What truths am I refusing to accept? Sylvester's dark green eyes looked straight into mine. First of all, Ferdinand isn't your guardian anymore. He belongs to another duchy. Second, he's no longer expected to aid you. Now that Ob Ahrensbach is gone, he needs to support Lady Detlinde while she begins dyeing her foundation. And third, to top it all off, you're engaged to Wilfred. I won't say it's wrong of you to worry about Ferdinand. I mean, I'm worried about him too. But you can't keep using that as an excuse to cling to him. As comforting as his presence might be, you need to let him go. You're going to spend the rest of your life with Wilfred, and the two of you need to start learning to support one another. Okay, you've got me there. As much as I didn't want to admit it, those were all things I would need to come to terms with eventually. It was tough, though. I didn't want to end my relationship with Ferdinand. Even now, I would at least complain to him in my letters, ask him to discreetly teach me things, and simply take comfort in speaking with him. Rosamund, it was nice to have Ferdinand looking out for you, wasn't it? Sorry, I had to stretch. Where did I end off? He always paved the way forward, or at least let you on the right path. Then he left, and you suddenly stopped meshing with people in the right same way. Despite your best attempts to do things as he taught you, they never produce the same results. Am I right? Yeah, anytime I ended up in a sticky situation, I can't help but think Ferdinand would have stopped me before things got this bad. Sorry. His expression softened. I'm sorry, guys. God dang it. I hate that Ferdinand left. I hate it. She needed him as her support base. I'm definitely going to have to edit this. Same here. His departure really made me realize how little I was thinking for myself. But the sad truth is that he's never coming back to Ehrenfest. As much as it hurts, we need to accept that. I don't know about that. To be completely honest, I don't really know. Clarissa had told me that Sylvester was in a disastrous state right now. In her words, he had underestimated the consequences of the purge and fumbled its execution. Well, she had phrased it more politely than that, but still. Little did she know the true reason for the chaos was that we had initially intended to carry out the purge while Ferdinand was still in Ehrenfest. He had planned to contain the Elias gangs for us, and we had assumed that he would be able to help us with the cleanup before moving to Ahrensbach. Of course, Ferdinand had ended up departing much sooner than anticipated, leaving us to manage the finer details and correct every minor mishap or calculation ourselves. Sylvester and I had always been deeply reliant on him, so doing everything for ourselves had been much easier said than done. Rosamund, Wilfred is one of your strongest ties to Ehrenfest, Sylvester continued. You need to do more to get along with each other. Getting close to him is one of the best ways you can prevent other parties from trying to claim you for themselves. I nodded slowly. Unpleasant though it was, this was a problem I would need to resolve myself. But what can I do to get closer to him? For now, just to pretend. You can start by acting like you are more worried about him. We need to put a stop to these rumors that you care more about Ferdinand and your fiancé. Yeah, yeah, he's asking for the impossible. But I responded with a dispassionate, okay. How was I even supposed to make people believe I was worried about Wilfried? Nothing about his situation seemed to warrant my concerns. He wasn't at risk of getting hungry like the children in the orphanage, nor had he run away from home as Lutz did that one time. Plus, I could support him. Perhaps I could support him as I did Thule whenever she was feeling anxious about her seamstress work. But he had already had adult scholars to rely on. In fact, I didn't think he was struggling with his workload in the first place. How was she supposed to? Yeah, give her some advice. We need help here. Sylvester wanted me to show more concern for Wilfrid than for Ferdinand, but that was a big ask. To begin with, I would need to send him an ordnance every day at dinner time, reminding him to eat, step by his hidden room every now and again to drag him back out of the outside world, and stay in close contact with his attendants to ensure that he was getting enough sleep. That was for Ferdinand, though! Not for Wilfrid. You don't have to do that for Wilfrid. I imagine we'd fall at the first hurdle, though. I'd contact him at dinner time, he'd reply that he obviously isn't working so late, then I need to bite back the urge to tell him that he isn't working hard enough then. So what was it that you wanted to discuss, Sylvester asked. I explained that some of the children in the orphanage had grown despondent and outlined my intention to prepare magic tools and rejuvenation potions for them. Sylvester grimaced. You don't need to do all that. People consider it extreme enough that you spared their lives and gave them a home in the orphanage. If you do any more, they're going to ask you to devote those resources to the children in their faction instead. He had said the exact same thing as Hartmut, so I gave exactly the same response. I merely wish to save the children of the orphanage I am expected to oversee. If we can provide that for those who don't have magic tools, then we can prevent more unnecessary deaths. If we leave them to their fate, it will be as though they never even born. The children won't have enough money to cover the expenses, and you won't be able to provide for them at all. Last time we discussed supporting the children in the orphanage and playroom, you suggested using their parents' money. I agreed, but those children don't have magic tools for a reason, because their parents can't afford to pay them. How do you expect to fund this endeavor? He was right. We'd only been able to support the other children because we were getting money from their parents. Even better, it was socially acceptable since it reinforced the traditional idea that parents were responsible for their kids. That approach wouldn't help us in this case, though. If we wanted to start providing magic tools, we would need to adapt. Well, I was thinking we could loan them the tools, then get them to pay us back once they're older and employed, I said. We had already set that precedent by loaning the children of the former Veronica faction the money they needed to make it through the Royal Academy, on the basis that they would repay their debts after graduation. Sylvester gave me a look of exasperation. I can accept loaning a few years' worth of money to apprentices who already work to support themselves, but you're suggesting that we saddle those children with an immense debt before they've even been baptized. You need to remember that living as a noble is expensive enough already, and people from the temple don't even have parents or relatives to rely on. How can you expect them to manage loan repayments on top of everything else? Well, I was fine with saving those kids' lives, but I refuse to cover their expenses. They have mana, and if they can get by with supplemental funding and their own earnings, then having them stay in the temple as blue priests seems fine to me. I can't think of a single reason to make orphans without magic tools into nobles. But Rosamund, the possessions taken from the former Veronica faction were mine to distribute among my allies. That I gave the children you saved anything at all was generous enough, especially when those belongings could have gone to the nobles of our faction. Instead of asking for more, be grateful that I've already gone above and beyond for them. Just as Bonifacius said, you need to consider the broader consequences of your actions. Unable to argue, I merely hung my head in response. Helping the children wouldn't be easy. I didn't know what my actions might inspire or how far the consequences would reach. I want to save them, but I don't know what the right solution is. Before you start getting caught up in things that shouldn't concern you, think about the things that should. Have you finished preparing for the Archduke Conference and Starnbind ceremony? We've already decided who's going to guard me and who will accompany me to the library. Good. Be back at the castle. You know when. As we continued to discuss the Archduke Conference, Bonifacius returned from the ritual. He was slouching his extremely broad shoulders and generally looked quite upset. How did your ritual go? I asked. Bonifacius shot Sylvester a resentful glare and then muttered, I received 17. That was still good! That's more than what Wilfred got! He was frustrated that he hadn't gotten as many divine protections as his nephew. Uncle, although we both started praying at the same time, I spent a lot longer offering mana when I needed to dye the foundation, Sylvester said. That probably explains it. Anyway, which gods gave you the protections? He sounded really eager, probably because he ended up with some unusual protections after his own ritual. So Bonifacius grunted, clenching and unclenching his hand. I turned to Omni Elemental too. Got most protections from gods about fighting. Well, duh, of course. I'll need to head to the training grounds to test how much stronger I've gotten. Okay, Master, Angelica exclaimed, lighting up at once. Let's have a match right away. At the same time, Cornelius let out a howl. At your age, why do you still care about getting stronger? Okay, that's going to have to wait. I'll see you guys in the next one.